Sorry. Sorry for my lips being so shiny. Super pies. I didn't realize how shiny they were until. But trying to ensure final stage of this healing of my lips. Exfoliating, trying to crack lip outside cold winter. Anyway, so Christianity conflating a very simple concept of history. Right? Like modern Christians, they don't get it. They don't get that like the whole planet was full of melanated people. And then for some reason, somewhere, start getting these other groups of people. Right? Now scientists agree. They don't agree where life started. They just agree that everywhere around the world, life, in terms of humanity, was black. Right? That's something everyone agrees with. Even when we look at Asian populations, they say, oh, they descend from the San tribe. This is an African tribe. Right? They say the ancient Mayans, this is argued clearly, but ancient Mayans, you can see on their temples, dark-skinned people drawn there. So, whether you're talking about America, Africa, Australia, we see the Aboriginals, indigenous people, whatever. Right? All dark-skinned people. But for some reason, start getting these other types of folk. Have no problem with it, but that's what happened, right? And I guess for some reason, these other groups of people engaging in behaviors that is decreasing their liberty. So I guess it starts out where they're following the trending behaviors of growing a population, but for some reason, they go into behaviors that is beginning to reduce their population. Whether this is over the span of hundreds of years or over the span of thousands of years, doesn't matter. In order for the livity, what the Rasta would say, to be taught, stories were passed down verbally, orally, oral traditions of how to engage with each other to ensure that livity is sustained. These ideas permeate into all types of folklores, and different cultures maintain these oral traditions in different titlings. But the most popular one is religion. Okay, and we see that the Judaic religion was an oral tradition, which eventually made its way being written down. Now, I'm glossing over the history clearly. I'm glossing over terminologies. I'm glossing over conflations so I can speak to a specific conflation. So don't get angry at me if you're like, well, don't say this term. Why are you using that term? Just understand that I'm speaking colloquially so I can get to the depth of what I want to speak to, right? So you got the Hebrews or the Jews or Judaic individuals passing down oral tradition into written. But where did that oral tradition come from? Well, the whole fact of the matter is it's coming from an idea that there's a group of people already living like that. They're just living like this. So, hey, man, how am I supposed to live? They could just tell you because they're living like that. They have internalized the wisdom. So they could just tell you. They don't really need to memorize anything because they're literally living that way. So you ask them any question, they verbalize answers that are wise. You take those verbal answers and you apply them to your life. So, for instance, a very specific, straightforward perspective. Children, obey your parents, which is right in the Lord. Right? They used to stone, or they say they were stoning children for misbehaving, but why would you need to end the life of people? Well, I'm assuming that's a perverse perspective because I'm just speaking on it colloquially. But let's speak to one that is not based on potential perversion. The idea of immaculate conception, right? The idea that two create three, right? And we've kind of bastardized it to make it the Holy Trinity, and we didn't even leave the feminine. But the Immaculate Conception had to do with the fact that the feminine, right? And these were all black folk telling them this back in the day. Whether it was a million years ago, we don't know. But hey, female, male, come together, create child, right? So when you get to the point now where you have the Greco-Roman doing all type of their types of love, agape, eros, kairos, all these different types of love versus just straightforward man, women, then you can understand a scripture being written where it says men should not lay with men. It is an abomination. Not saying that y'all ain't free to do what you doing, but if the majority of the population is doing that, then clearly you're not gonna survive as a population, especially if you're a small village, right? So you can now understand where all these different verses speaking about everlasting life or keeping your population alive consistently makes sense, where the verbiage connects. All the other stuff, like I said, there's a lot of perversions because there's a lot of different dynasties and powerful individuals who had control of Christianity, right? Just the fact that you might be Catholic or you might be Protestant, that right there just shows you there's a schism right there. There's clearly a schism between the Vatican Church, right? The Pope. There's a clear difference between those guys and then the royal family, the king, and the Protestant movement that comes off of the royal family. And then the actual Reformation that further separates themselves from the royal family to say, well, we're truly Protestant. We're not in alignment to any dignitary or any whatever. And then there's more reformations because every group that schismed, you had to have some amount of power to even schism. So it was like the second in command or third in command or fourth in command individuals saying, yo, I'm tired of this hierarchy. And they shoot off into their own thing, use their money, use their resources, and start their own movement. And maybe their movement might have been broke, but eventually they get enough people, enough of a population growing, where another schism is bound to happen again. And you look and you see the amount of denominations, and it only makes sense because there is no strict rule. This is about sustaining life, keeping yourself and your population alive for as long as possible, forever, essentially. What would stop a population from dying if we continue to intermix, right? But then what happens, right? You start disobeying the basic principles. You start adding in, taking away, and just making up your own Bibles. We've got so many different Bibles now that no one even really knows what is clear liberty unless you just really meditate to the self and to true wisdom of what would align with nature and what just makes sense, 2 plus 2 equaling 4. Then you're able to read the Bible properly and you're able to see the nonsense which is there to oppress a population versus the stuff that is substance to ensure and sustain liberty. And because people don't approach the Bible like that, they don't even understand the history of it, and they argue the history while the scholars are here saying, well, majority of the scholars are dead. They already were like this back in the time, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Their students are the ones now saying, look, man, these guys, we've gone over their work. They didn't lie. Da-da-da-da-da. It's just the church, the hierarchy, the billionaires, right? The Vatican and the royal family and all these people who align to this Christian forms of dogma are the ones who are not going to switch the rule in terms of letting you guys know, hey, this was all a ruse to keep you guys subjugated to us. Okay? That's why we now allow LGBT. Back in the day, we were crucifying them. Because we don't really have morals. We're just trying to keep you guys subjugated to us and keep our birth rate growing. But now the birth rate is getting negative. So what are you going to say now? What are you going to say now? Black folk, we just have it in us. We already know, okay, I might want to go on with foolishness here and here and here, but eventually I'm going to mature up and get to my, well, at least the ones who aren't completely brainwashed, but That's a conversation for another day.